Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. If you're a network administrator, you already know how crucial access control is, so today we are opening up the playbook on a really vital aspect of network management, configuring external server authentication in the Sangfor Internet Access Gateway, or IAG. Whether you're looking to seamlessly integrate your internal corporate directory or maybe you just want to allow frictionless guest access via social media, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to walk through the exact steps, the interface menus, and most importantly, the security best practices you really need to manage these credentials effectively. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into our agenda for today. We'll be covering 1. The authentication workflow, 2. Configuring LDAP integration, 3. Social media authentication setup, and 4. Comparing those authentication workflows.
Starting off with Part 1, the authentication workflow.
So when we talk about third-party or external authentication, what's actually going on? Well, we're looking at a scenario where the user account information isn't stored locally on the IAG itself. Instead, those credentials live somewhere else. Maybe that's a Windows Active Directory server or even a public Facebook server. The IAG essentially acts as a highly intelligent middleman here. It intercepts the user's input, securely forwards those credentials to the third-party server, waits patiently for a pass or fail result, and then grants or denies internet access based entirely on that feedback. Think of this whole process like a strict 5-step relay race. Step 1, the client attempts to connect and sends their authentication info over to the gateway. Step 2, the IAG takes that data and securely forwards it to your configured third-party server. Step 3, that external server does all the heavy lifting, checking its own database to verify the information and then sends a result back. Step 4, the IAG receives this feedback and confirms whether the client passed or failed. And finally, Step 5, if the authentication is successful, the client is granted access to connect to the internet. Understanding this exact flow is totally crucial because, if something breaks, you need to know exactly which step of the relay dropped the baton. That way you aren't blaming your firewall for a simple password typo. Let's move to Part 2 and see how this builds, configuring LDAP integration. All right, our first practical step in the Sangfor IAG interface is to actually define the server. Under the authentication server settings, you're going to click Add and just select LDAP Server from the drop-down menu. This simply tells the IAG that it needs to prepare for a standard directory protocol connection, which, as you probably know, operates very differently from a standard database or a radius server. Now, what's really interesting about this specific configuration menu is the exact information the IAG demands on the Basics tab. You can't just point it at an IP address and hope for the best. Yes, you definitely need the server IP, but crucially, you need the administrator DN, that's the distinguished name, and its corresponding password. See, the IAG uses this privileged account to essentially bind to the directory and perform lookups. You also have to define the base DN. Think of the base DN as telling the IAG exactly which specific folder or organizational unit within your massive corporate directory it should start searching in. Basically, if you get the base DN wrong, the IAG is going to be flying blind and won't find your users. But hold on, before we leave that Basics tab, we have to talk about security. As a network admin, you are literally handling the keys to the corporate kingdom here. You absolutely must check the box to enable encryption, either SSL or TLS. Without this, the IAG will just forward your user's LDAP credentials across the network in plain text. And yeah, that is a massive security vulnerability. Additionally, you should always use a dedicated service account for the administrator DN with just enough privileges to read the directory, and for sure, ensure you verify the domain certificate to prevent any nasty man-in-the-middle attacks. Okay, once the connection is secured, we move over to the Sync Options tab. Now, you definitely don't want to pull every single computer, printer, and random service account into your IAG policies, right? You only want the actual users. So here, you define the user attribute. This is typically SM account name for Microsoft environments, which is just the standard Windows logon name. You also configure user and OU filters. By setting the object class to user and person, you guarantee the IAG is only synchronizing actual human employees into its local mapping, which keeps your policies super clean and efficient. Because let's be real, nobody wants to accidentally apply web filtering rules to a network printer. The final step in this workflow is execution. Configuring the server doesn't actually do anything at all until you apply it to an active policy. So, in the Authentication Policy menu, under the Off Method tab, you select password-based and literally just check the box next to the LDAP server you just built. In our case, that 192.168.20.89 server. Boom. Now, when users hit the captive portal, the IAG knows exactly where to route those login attempts. Shifting gears now to Part 3. social media authentication setup.
So unlike LDAP, where the IAG handles the password directly, social media integrations rely on the modern OAuth standard. This is a token-based system. To make this work, the IAG and the external provider, let's use Facebook as an example, need to establish a trusted handshake. As the administrator, your first fundamental requirement is actually to leave the IAG entirely. You have to go over to the provider's developer console to generate two absolutely critical pieces of data, an app ID and an app secret.
Here is exactly what that looks like in the real world. You're looking at the Facebook developer console. You'll create a new app specifically tailored for your captive portal. Once that's created, under the basic settings, Facebook generates your app ID and your app secret. You can kind of think of the app ID as your public username and the app secret as your highly classified password. That secret proves to Facebook that your specific IAG appliance is actually authorized to request these user logins. And just like with LDAP, we cannot ignore security here. Within the Facebook client OAuth settings, there are two totally non-negotiable toggles you must enable. First up, enforce HTTPS. This guarantees that the authentication tokens passed between Facebook, the user's web browser, and your IAG simply cannot be intercepted. Second, you want to enable use strict mode for redirect URIs. This is absolutely crucial because it prevents attackers from hijacking the login process and redirecting the authentication token to their own malicious server.
And this brilliantly illustrates the final bridge between the two systems. You've got the Facebook developer console on one side and the Sangfor IAG social media account configuration screen on the other. You literally just copy the app ID from Facebook and paste it right into the app ID field on the IAG. Then, you copy the app secret and paste that into the app secret field. Finally, you grab the callback domain from the IAG and just make sure it matches your Facebook settings perfectly. This completes the entire loop. It allows the IAG to securely redirect your users to Facebook and effortlessly process that returning authentication token.
Bringing it all together in Part 4, comparing authentication workflows.
So the crucial point here is really understanding the architectural difference between these two approaches. LDAP integration relies heavily on an internal enterprise directory that you completely control. It requires deep synchronization using base DNs and very specific user attributes. Crucially, the IAG itself presents the captive portal and handles the user's password prompt directly before forwarding it. On the flip side, social media authentication leverages an external public provider that you do not control. It relies on OAuth app IDs and secrets, and importantly, the IAG never actually sees the user's password. It just redirects the user to the third party's login page and waits for that secure token to come back. Both of these external authentication methods are incredibly powerful tools to have in your Sangfor IAG arsenal, but they clearly serve entirely different use cases. One gives you that strict internal corporate control, while the other offers totally frictionless public access. So I want to leave you with this question to ponder for your own infrastructure. Looking at your specific network topology, your unique user base, and your exact security requirements, which external authentication method best fits your needs today? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy configuring.